Good afternoon. It does seem that in terms of the US data and the global data side of things last night, that things were actually looking pretty good. So we had a big playoff between economic data and macro influences. If we look in Europe, the French business confidence numbers were okay, some of the German economic data was okay, the Canadian retail sales numbers were quite strong, up 0.7%. And then you can focus in the US, we saw consumer confidence coming out the highest level since February. The Richmond Fed numbers were okay, matching some of the other situations we've seen in the regional manufacturing numbers. But then if we focus on the macro side of things, and it was certainly the bigger influence, hence why we saw the S&P down over about 1%, euro dollar trading below 129, and the Aussie dollar coming off quite sharply again. We did see the Philly Fed president coming out, Mr. Plosser. Now, he actually has been a very outspoken member of the FOMC over the last 6 months or so. He has been saying that QE3 should not come. He is not a voting member, hence why his vote didn't count. But he has actually said that QE3 will have a very limited effect on employment. We'd probably echo those sentiments as well. Some of the analysis we've seen from Goldman Sachs suggests a $600 billion program in terms of asset purchases would lower the unemployment rate in the US by about 0.1%. So it really does have a marginal benefit to the unemployment situation. But his comments were enough to see the S&P come off quite sharply, despite that good US data that we saw last night. We're still focusing very clearly on what's going on in Spain. Spain looks very, very divided, not just because of a bailout, but because of the regions at the moment. We've seen the Catalan president calling for an early election. He's called for a November 25th election. There is some worry in the market that perhaps this could be used as a referendum for more autonomy, if not independence, further down the line. And I think it does nothing to really help out the Spanish reputation in the market. The market's still very keen to hear when we're going to hear of a rescue assistance from the Spanish, but that looks like it potentially will come at late October after we've seen the regional elections coming through. There seems to be a number of articles, mainly from the FT, that perhaps there's going to be big concern about big bank recapitalisation. Back in June in the summit, part of the reason why the market was so appeased was because they said that the ESM would be allowed to recapitalise the banks directly. Now that it does seem that Germany are backtracking on this, so we may see a bit of a sell-off coming through. So there's interesting rhetoric coming through in the Financial Times over the course of that. And you can add also some company-specific issues. What we saw with Caterpillar coming out and downgrading its 2015 earnings, and also we saw Maersk as well, the big shipping company, reducing capacity because of global demand as well. So I think that's a bit of a concern coming through. We did see BlackRock overnight coming out and pushing to clients that they see a pullback on the cards for the S&P. And I think Goldman Sachs retaining its 1250 target for year-end for the S&Ps is still a bit of a concern. If they believe that the S&P is going to drop 13%, then that's obviously a big concern going into the fourth quarter. Their premise is that the fiscal cliff, which is looming large, will see people looking to take profits and look to sell out some of these positions quite heavily on some of these concerns that the US may slip back into recession based on some of the spending cuts that is going to be coming through. So all in all, we're seeing a bit of a risk-off day here in Asia. The ASX is down about 0.5%, although there are some modest signs of buying coming through. But all eyes on back end of the day. We'll keep our eyes on China, see what happens there. That market doesn't look particularly flash technically at the moment, although I think as we go on to the session it might be interesting to see our opening calls on Europe. They're under severe pressure at the moment, and we'll have to see how they fare going into the back end of the day. We also do have Mr. Weidmann, the head of the Bundesbank, talking tonight in Europe, and you can't imagine that he's going to be coming out with too many positive comments given his big anti-OMT stance at the moment. So as at the moment, a bit of a risk-off session. The macro indicators are not looking too hot at the moment.